Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about some refueling tips for the Tomcat. When I was learning to refuel the Tomcat, even though I could do it in a few other jets, the Tomcat really took a long time to master, and it still gives me a challenge even to this day. But here's a few tips that I haven't heard anyone else mention in other videos. There's plenty of videos out there. But the bottom line is, first of all, it just takes practice. Eventually you will get a feel for it. It took me weeks of trying every day before I finally got to it, but here's some stuff that helped me. So tip number one is contact the tanker early so your menu's already up, because you don't want to be dealing with this. Okay, so you don't want to be dealing with that while you're trying to make fine adjustments when you get closer, so do that early. The second tip is put your wings to bomb sweep mode. See our wing indicator here. Let's go back. As soon as you do that, it's going to want to pitch down. Add some nose up trim until it gets level-ish, and try not to run into the tanker when you're doing that. And when I'm setting my trim, I like to get the trim slightly nose down, and the reason for that is it's easier for me to release a little bit of pressure with my fingertips in the reverse direction than it is for me to push my entire hand forward to make the aircraft go down. Okay, so next tip is when you put out your refueling probe, it's gonna want to yaw a little bit towards the probe to the right side, so add a couple taps of roll trim to the left to compensate for that a little bit. Alright. Next tip is approach from the side until you get close, because it will want to you get a bunch of wake turbulence, and that makes it not very nice if you try to rejoin from exactly behind the tanker. Okay, so the next tip is, this is good if you don't have head tracking, is the visibility is pretty terrible. A lot of people use their track IR to like move forward like this, but if you don't have head tracking, you can't do that, and it also means you have to stay in an uncomfortable position the entire time you're doing it. So lower your seat position so that it's pretty low like that. Then you can sit in a comfortable position in your chair and still see the tanker while you're refueling. If you don't do this, you may have a hard time seeing the tanker. If you don't have head tracking at all, like the default head position of the pilot is such that you can't really see the tanker, and you can't fly formation with something you can't see. So that's a tip I haven't heard anyone else offer up, but it really made a big difference for me.
Ready for contact. Clear contact.
Alright, the next thing is don't look at the basket. A lot of others have suggested this, but just don't look at it. Look at the tanker and try to line it up that way. You look at the basket out of the corner of your eye, but really just kind of look at the tanker. And once you've made contact,
nice, that's gonna quench her thirst.
adjust your right to left by looking forward. Adjust your... Oop, I screwed that up. Okay, here's a good...
This basket just doesn't like us today.
Here's a good tip. Is if you come unhooked, back off. Don't try to save it. And try to get it back in. Back off and reapproach. Because you will really struggle. You'll be looking at the basket. You can't look at the basket. The basket should be in your peripheral vision only. The other thing is, it's hard to judge. You have no depth perception, so it's hard to judge how close you're getting. So, out of the corner of your eye, you have to keep track of that by looking at the tanker. If you start to see the tail in your peripheral vision, you're getting a little slow. So left to right, just kind of keep that pod in your HUD.
Transfer complete.
There we go.
Disconnect.
So those are the tips that have helped me. It really just is a matter of practice as in terms of getting the feel right. So when you're alongside it, you know, just it's hard to judge depth perception. I've heard some suggestions of, I won't call anyone out specifically, but I've heard suggestions like, well, get VR or use your split throttle to help with the yaw. Those answers frustrate me a little bit because they are kind of out of touch with what the average player is actually using in terms of gear, and it shouldn't require super sophisticated, expensive equipment in order to do this basic task. So I think these tips will work for anyone, even if you don't have head tracking and if you just have a basic stick. You should be able to do this eventually. Obviously, better gear helps, but this is what worked for me. So hopefully it helps somebody, and I will see you next time.